So now I have the great honor of introducing someone whose leadership and dedication have been instrumental in shaping our nation's environmental policies, particularly in the areas of air quality, public health, and environmental justice. Janet McCabe, the former Deputy Administrator of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, is a trailblazer. She has served in multiple roles focusing on an unwavering commitment to improving the health and well-being of communities across the country. She has served as the Assistant Commissioner of the Office of Air Quality in the state of Indiana before moving on to several key roles inside the EPA, including Acting Assistant Administrator for the Office of Air and Radiation under President Barack Obama, where she played a crucial role in advancing policies that reduce harmful pollutants and promote clean energy solutions. She also has been a professor of practice at the Indiana University McKinney School of Law and director of our Indiana University Environmental Resilience Institute until 2021. She returned to the EPA in 2021 to serve the administration of President Joe Biden, where she continued to lead the EPA's efforts in tackling some of the most pressing environmental challenges of our time. And under her leadership, the agency remained focused on ensuring that environmental laws were enforced equitably and that the benefits of a clean and safe environment are shared by all. Calling Janet the former Deputy Director sounds a little odd to me because really she served in that role till literally 2 weeks ago. And so Janet, congratulations on your well-deserved retirement. I know that you have served the country to your utmost. Janet's work is a testament to the power of public service, and her passion for protecting both people and the planet is really truly inspiring. And we're incredibly fortunate to have her with us here today to share her insights. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Janet McCabe.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Dean Mooney. That was so nice, really nicer than I deserved. But it is nice to be back here in Indiana, sleep in my own bed for a change, and reconnect with a lot of people and see everybody who's here. I will say that I'm not sure I really like the word retire, so we'll see. Thank you to the O'Neill School. Thank you to the Lawrence Livermore National Lab and the Livermore Lab Foundation for hosting this event, but even more for making all of this work happen. And I will say that when I saw the title, Roads to Removal, I thought that was a way to make Purdue feel better. And then I realized, no, just an IU thing. So this, you may know, this is one of a series of symposia that the authors of this report are hosting around the country to talk about this project, which is truly a national scale analysis of the opportunities for carbon dioxide removal. And it's just so exciting. And honestly, I didn't know very much about it before I got invited to do this. And so it's been great for me to understand what all's going on here. It's really important, I think, the fact that they are looking at this problem, this issue, these challenges with a regional perspective, because things really are different around the country. The opportunities are different, the challenges are different, the effects of climate change are different. And from my own work here in Indiana, I know that we certainly care about what's happening in other parts of the country, but it's just not relevant to the people who are making decisions here. What's going on in places like California or Florida or whatever, right? I mean, it doesn't speak to us in the same way. There's some exceptions. There's cars, trucks, planes, and trains all over the country. And so EPA and others work on national level policies and regulations to drive changes there nationally. But especially when it comes to agriculture, things are so different as you move around the country that it is really, really important to look at the regional and even the local needs and opportunities. Another critical aspect of the roads to removal project that I've picked up is that it's looking at the availability of approaches both in the right now, near term, and also things that are still in development. There are strategies that are available now that are affordable, that are cost effective, and that have all kinds of other benefits that agriculture can be implementing right now, as well as other contributors to carbon in our atmosphere, of course. But there are many that we still need to work on for a while, and that's important to recognize too. So if there are two key points that I hope you'll take from my remarks today to sort of kick this off at a high level, it's that opportunities do exist right now and in the near future for agriculture to reduce atmospheric carbon, and we need to work with regional and local experts to implement the ones that make sense for this part of the country. And second, many of these strategies are not costly to begin with and have significant benefits beyond their carbon reduction potential. And I know you'll hear a lot about that over the course of the next day and a half. So I'll just say again, in the category of you never know what might happen when you accept an invitation, as Dean Mooney said, I did retire from federal service a couple of weeks ago, so I just want to emphasize my former ethics counsel would want me to do this. I'm not speaking on behalf of the US EPA, but I do hope that I can put some of these conversations and these issues into a little bit of national context and emphasize to you from my perspective at the EPA how much activity and support there is for this kind of work going on right now. This is the moment to move forward with these exciting things. So I want to convey to you in the next few minutes how enthusiastic I am for the immediate near-term need, feasibility, affordability, and advantages of carbon removal strategies, and assure you that there are willing partners at all levels of government and in the corporate, nonprofit, academic worlds to work on these projects with you. And when I say support of all kinds, I mean research support, policy support, technical support, and perhaps most important, financial support. This is an amazing time to be looking to the future and harnessing the combination of available technologies and strategies and those that are still in development. Some of them are very, very low tech, and many people actually maybe are even doing them now and they don't even realize how advantageous they are for our carbon removal goals. So that's what I want to do. This is a nonpartisan topic. The changes in climate are affecting corns, beans, water quality, precipitation, temperature, where species can grow, extreme weather, costs to businesses, local governments, and American families, no matter who is in the White House and in Congress. So it's really a great time to be having this conversation. I wanted to just talk for a few minutes about where we are with the impacts of climate change in this part of the country. I probably don't need to tell you guys much about that, but I honestly can't help myself. And in particular, it is impacting the agricultural economy here, as well as so many communities in Indiana and this part of the Midwest that depend on agriculture for their way of life and well-being. Then I wanted to talk for a minute about one of the key premises of the Roads to Removal project, which is that even as we work to implement every sort of mitigation measure we can to reduce carbon emissions, we're going to have to look at everything possible to do, and that includes pulling carbon out of the air, which if I had thought about this 10 years ago, which I probably did for like 2 seconds, I would have thought, oh yeah, right, that's science fiction, that'll never work, put it back in the ground, are you crazy? but it's not crazy. It's doable, and we're gonna need to pull on all of those things. And agriculture has a part to play there. I want to mention what EPA is doing, working with other federal agencies like USDA, the Department of Energy, with states and with the agricultural community around these types of strategies. And I'll just touch on, too, the kinds of opportunities that are available now through the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and other programs to support these programs in a big way for people who are looking to implement these measures. So number one, there's little debate anymore that the climate is changing, and that means changes on the ground for all of us. Not every one of these changes are in and of themselves bad. Longer growing seasons, for example, could be beneficial for certain crops in certain areas. However, when scientists look at all of the pros and cons and the impacts now and into the future, and the things that we are seeing and likely to see, the negative impacts far, far outweigh the positive. And we're not just talking about more wildfires in the West and hurricanes in the Southeast, though these are traumatic, devastating, destabilizing, and costly events in money and lives. We've just seen the impacts of Hurricanes Helene and Milton, taking communities that people lived in one day in North Carolina and leveling them. And our hearts go out to people who are dealing with those situations. And our hearts go out in part because we know there, but for the grace of God, goes any one of us and any one community in this country that could be struck by extreme weather. But even without those really dramatic events, climate change and its impacts matter here in the Midwest just as much as they do anywhere else. In fact, the reality is that there's no small town, big city, or rural community across the country now that is unaffected by the changes that are happening in our climate. I was going to show you a bunch of slides, and then I realized I'm completely out of practice of running a slideshow, and I would just be fumbling around. So I'm not going to read you statistics. I will gloss over the top, but just tell you that there's information out there, should you want it, to give you and people that you would like to share it with a sense of what's actually happening on the ground and in the air in our communities across the country. EPA just issued its 5th Climate Indicators Report. If you haven't seen the Climate Indicators Report, it's an absolutely fabulous resource. EPA does it every couple of years, and it looks at a number of key indicators over time and shows what's happening on those. Intensity of heat waves, wildfires, temperature, water temperatures, all those sorts of things. And as I'm sure you are not surprised to hear, the 5th Climate Indicators Report shows increases in wildfires and heat intensity and all those sorts of things, including here in the Midwest. There's a lot of focus on the Great Lakes region because those Great Lakes are such a huge economic driver for so much of the country and indeed the world, but also very, very important to our local ecology. And the water temperature is changing there. It's affecting fish species. There is coastal erosion there. It's very visible. There's certain places around the world where it's more visible than others, right? And in Indiana, perhaps it's less visible than when you see houses collapsing into Lake Michigan. But that doesn't mean that it's not happening here. We're seeing drought, we're seeing more extreme storms, we're seeing flooding. All of these things affect the bottom lines of people who do business here in Indiana, especially farmers, and communities and local officials. I remember when I was working with IU before I went back to EPA, I worked a lot with mayors. And I could just tell they were looking over their shoulder, looking at the Wabash River, charging down at their community and not being able to do a thing about it, and having to understand and then explain to the voters what a 100-year flood was and why they'd had 3 of them in the last 18 months, because that sure doesn't make sense. So we know these things are happening, and it's important for people to have access to good, credible sources of information to help them with that. Okay, so What are we doing about it? Well, you know that for decades there have been efforts in this country and around the world to reduce carbon emissions. Those have focused significantly to date on the use of fossil fuels around the country and around the globe. So that's power plants, it's transportation of all kinds, oil and gas development. And progress is absolutely being made there for sure. Both of the times that I've been at EPA have been times of significant policy movement forward. And while these policies have been controversial, in my lifetime have always been controversial, difficult to get across the finish line, and then there are legal challenges and there are changes in who's in charge and there are changes in policy, but the industry is moving forward towards a less dependent on fossil fuel economy. Now is a time when that is really exploding, and I'll talk about that more in a little bit. But increasingly, it has become very, very clear that you can decarbonize the power sector. Everybody can drive an electric vehicle, although they won't. You can do all of those things, and we still will not get to where the scientists say we need to be in terms of carbon in the atmosphere. This is a team sport. It takes not only all levels of all agencies of federal government, it takes state government, it takes local government, tribal government, as well as non-governmental entities, including researchers, nonprofits, business, agriculture, working across political lines, supporting one another, sharing ideas, doing research, making it widely available, doing pilot programs, and then sharing the results of those with other people. That's why convenings like this are so very important, and I'm really so glad that you're all here. The United States has established a goal to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. This is based on scientific information and being part of a global community where we realize that while we are not the only emitter of carbon emissions in this world, certainly not. We are one of the largest. We have a lot of responsibility, and it's hard for us to expect other countries to be aggressive and ambitious if we're not doing so ourselves. So we have a goal to reach carbon neutrality by 2050 with some significant milestones along the way. And if I were competent enough to show you slides, I would show you the slide that shows how steep that curve is to go down and where we are on it. We're making progress, but we have a long way to go. It's increasingly clear, as I said, that some amount of getting to that goal will come from pulling carbon out of the air. In 2021, the State Department and the White House Climate Advisor put out a really important document that laid out the vision and the plan to get to 2050. And it wasn't just a vision, it was actually a plan. It was a set of possible paths for us to actually meet this goal. Because setting a goal that nobody thinks is achievable is not a good way to drive policy forward, and is a big bummer, right? It discourages everybody. We need to have goals that we can actually reach, even if they're hard. So there are pathways to get there, and as I said, we've focused a lot on a clean energy economy, on developing regulations and providing support for decarbonizing the transportation sector, electricity production, fossil fuel extraction, commercial and residential buildings, which are a significant contributor to greenhouse gas emissions in the country, and the agricultural sector, which contributes about 10% of our economy's emissions. That might sound like not much, but it actually is a really significant slice. And if you can make a difference there, that will really contribute to getting to that goal. Earlier this month, EPA released its annual report of greenhouse gas emissions emitted by industrial facilities. So if you work at a big company that emits greenhouse gases, you would know that you have a reporting requirement, and EPA has been collecting this data for many years. And what does it show? Well, it shows that greenhouse gases from that industrial sector, including power plants, were in 2023 were about 4% lower than they were in 2022, and they were down about 22% from 2011. That is mostly driven by decreases in power plant emissions. So there's more to come there, as I'm sure that you know, as we move towards more renewable power, and so there's a lot of opportunity there, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. We know that there are costs associated with all of these things. There's technical feasibility issues. Is technology ready to deploy at scale? But under any circumstances, let me say again, and I'll probably say it again a bunch of times, removing carbon from the atmosphere will be part of the solution. That's what the Roads to Removal project is premised on, concludes and demonstrates, and helps to provide some detail for how to actually do that and why it is a positive thing. So, in my view, the path towards carbon removal, the path towards carbon sequestration will be determined by people having the right information and by having the support to undertake literally changes in the way they've done business, perhaps for many years, to embrace new technologies, give them a try, see how it's working for their neighbors, see what the advantages are, and then find that they work for them too. So what are the opportunities right now, and why is this the moment for us to move forward with them? When I was with IU at the Environmental Resilience Institute, I experienced a huge amount of energy that farmers and local leaders and businesses and nonprofits have around the state of Indiana to understand the climate impacts and to find ways to increase our state's resilience and our state's contributions to reducing carbon pollution. And I remember especially some very exciting conversations with people in the agricultural sector. This was all pretty new to me. I'm not an agricultural economist by training, but they realized the huge potential for carbon storage in the thousands and thousands of acres of farmland here in Indiana. And I remember walking around and just seeing, the fields go on forever, and every acre has potential there. And that's not just potential for helping with this challenge, but it's potential for making money for those farmers as they contribute to that solution. So I know that you're going to have sessions on each aspect of this, so I don't want to go into the details of that because A, you will, and B, I'm not an expert. But I want to talk about what's going on at the federal government right now and why the opportunities are so great. And their names are Bill and Ira. We used to talk about our two favorite uncles, Bill and Ira. Bill is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Ira is the Inflation Reduction Act. And in the last 3 years, those two pieces of legislation, which were voted into being by Congress and signed by the president, have brought literally billions of dollars across the country to projects, to communities, to industries, and to governments to address these very things. The funding through these two bills gives us the opportunity to encourage emissions reductions across the board through zero-emission vehicles, capitalizing green financial institutions. So a lot of this money is going into the private sector to help finance the kinds of projects that are very hard to finance on the private market. All of these things were based on true experts in the field, whether it's the financial, green capital field, whether it's clean energy, whatever it is, designing these programs to have the best impact. The infrastructure in this country is old and aging and needs repair. And so a lot of the impetus for the bipartisan infrastructure law was that very thing. We should be able to drive on a bridge and not worry about whether it's going to collapse under us, right? in investing those billions of dollars into fixing our bridges, highways, tunnels, water, wastewater and drinking water infrastructure in this country. There are drinking water pipes in this country that are made of wood and were installed not in the last century, but the century before that. So need some attention. Let's do all of those things in a way that helps make the country more resilient to climate change and also does it in a way that will reduce the amount of carbon emissions that go into those activities. So this is truly amazing. The Uncle IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, is very focused on clean energy and other areas of the economy where climate smart approaches can be implemented. For example, it includes $21 billion, my boss at EPA, the administrator, would always say, that's billion with a B, for climate smart agriculture and forestry, which is being implemented by the USDA through their Natural Resources Conservation Service. And that supports innovative and cost-effective measures for farmers to use to start implementing these best practices that can help with carbon removal, cover cropping, and that sort of thing. So there's literally billions of dollars out there. A lot of that money is going through programs that people are already familiar with, USDA programs or EPA programs that already exist. But I want to talk about one that is new in the IRA. This is an EPA program called the Carbon Pollution Reduction Grant Program. It is a two-part program, and the first part of it provided to every single state that wanted to $250 million of planning money to either develop for the first time a climate plan or to redo a climate plan they might already have. And I think it was 47 states accepted that money, including Indiana, and have now produced a climate plan. And they had to make sure that they involved people and entities from across their states so that everybody had a voice. Doing that plan then qualified those states to apply for some big money to implement parts of their plans. So the Indiana Department of Environmental Management and entities around the state of Indiana put together a 126-page report. It's called the Priority Climate Action Plan. I believe I can say that IU, the Resilience Institute, helped develop that plan, so yay, IU. And it lays out a series of actions across what the state has going on. Electric, industrial, transportation, agriculture, residential and commercial buildings, waste management actions that stakeholders across the state can collaborate on. And so it is a fantastic thing that 47 states across the country now have these plans. Maybe informed by the Road to Removal project, I don't know. Indiana's Climate Action Plan leans in to ag and land management for carbon sequestration here in Indianapolis and across the state. In urban areas, the plan proposes to plant more than 500,000 trees by 2030, 2.5 million trees by 2050, especially in low-income and disadvantaged communities where there is not a lot of green space. Trees, you know, and they suck carbon out of the air. They also provide so many other benefits to communities across the state. Better air quality, better soil retention, flooding. It's just, trees are, you gotta love trees, right? And then you have to plant them and make sure you water them. As the 8th largest farming state in the US, the 6th largest crop producer, cropland management plays an enormous role in the state's ability to sequester CO2 emissions. As I said, there's money to be made here. And the plan does establish targets around expanded adoption of these best practices. So that's really exciting to see that support in Indiana's plan. This includes increased cover cropping, crop rotation, no-till, reduced till, tillage management, and these plans, they're never set in stone, right? They're always living documents and can be enhanced and expanded as technologies expand. So one of the fun things about working at the national level is that I got to go around the country. In fact, I tried to not come to Indiana too much because people were looking at me funny, like, you're favoring your home state, like who wouldn't? But at any rate, I did go around the country, and it's always funny because you go and every state is the #1 producer of whatever, they can't all be, but they all say they are. But anyway, earlier this summer, I got to stand with Nebraska Governor Jim Pillen at an absolutely stunningly beautiful farm outside of Omaha as we were announcing $300 million to the state of Nebraska for their plan under the Carbon Pollution Reduction Program that will focus a lot on Nebraska's agricultural sector because they're #1 in everything. Let me just talk to Governor Pillen for a minute, he'll tell you. But a lot of why that project was so appealing when the folks at EPA looked at that application was that they're going to be doing things that will then pave the way for states around the country and agricultural programs around the country to do similar sorts of things. So to really work on and improve the ways of quantifying carbon sequestration and how do you monetize that, and how can people feel really confident that if you're saying, yes, I am sequestering carbon in the soil or I'm sequestering carbon in this particular crop, you actually are. Right, because we can have systems, and if they're not reliable, the climate will keep changing, and we will not be better off. So it was amazing to be in that state and to see all the excitement about what that $300 million. That's a lot of money, right? To do a lot of things, to actually not just write plans, but actually produce things and get clean energy installed and operating. And so we will all benefit from not just the project in Nebraska, but all the other ones from around the country. So there is lots of money. Let me say it again. If you need help trying to figure out how to find your pathway to Uncle Bill and Uncle Ira's piggy bank, there's lots of information on USDA, EPA, the White House website, and people certainly at EPA who would be happy to help you get connected with the right people. Funding is just one. It's a hugely important piece of the puzzle, and we really haven't had this kind of funding until Congress passed these 2 laws. But of course, there are other things that government is doing to help support these things. Research, pilot projects. The Department of Energy funds pilot projects for all kinds of different energy-related innovations, and there's lots of that going on around the specific types of technologies and strategies that you guys are going to be focusing on here. And I don't really want to try to go into that because you guys will have a better time to talk about that. I just will emphasize again how many additional benefits these types of approaches have in terms of making quality of life better right now, improving air quality, improving water quality, controlling erosion, improving soil health, all of those things. You get all of that when you do this. So if reducing carbon is not what gets you excited, there's lots of other reasons to do these sorts of things. I wanted to finish by skipping several pages here. And re-emphasize that the federal government very much understands the opportunities that we have here, and that this is an important moment. And I can reflect personally that the way the agencies are working together on these issues is significantly more than it was even during the Obama administration, when I thought we were all pretty much focused on these issues, but not like now. And that is so exciting to see, because EPA is not the ag agency. We do a lot of things that we hope can help the agricultural community, but USDA is people's entry point into those sorts of things. I wanted to finish by offering 2 historical examples that helps me to feel like we absolutely can do this. And by now, these things are a while ago, so there may be people here there are people in the room who didn't live through these. So the first is acid rain. Back in the 70s and 80s, when I was a kid growing up, not here, but I grew up somewhere, there were huge concerns about acid rain, especially in the eastern part of the country, in the Northeast, the effect that acid rain was having on forests, lakes, streams, and fish and frogs and all kinds of aquatic species. People talked about the forest dying. I remember I would spend my summers at a lake on Cape Cod, and there were years where there were no toads. Like no toads. That just wasn't the way it was supposed to be. The answer was to reduce the amount of sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides mostly being emitted by coal-fired power plants. It was an incredibly divisive issue. There were people who said this will bring the economy down. Nobody will be able to pay their electric bill. The country will go dark. And Congress, including, as another historical note, a former Muncie area Congressman, Phil Sharp, who was in Congress at the time, they figured out how to turn this complex environmental issue into something that Congress knows how to do, which is to write budgets. So they turned pollution into money, into credits, and then they did a budget. Right? And they provided enough time, and they provided some emergency off-ramps in case people got into trouble. And it turns out that it was way less expensive than everybody expected. Nobody's lights went out. And the acid rain problem is mostly resolved in the eastern part of the country. So that was so hard at the time. We can do this. The second one is maybe even more amazing, and that is the hole in the ozone layer, which again, around the same time, we were worried that chemicals called chlorofluorocarbons, which were used, people thought they were great. They were used as refrigerants, air conditioners, refrigerators. They were used in foams. They were used in aerosols. They were magical. Well, it turns out that they were eating a hole in the ozone layer that protects all of us on Earth from the UV rays of the sun and help protect us from all getting cataracts and skin cancer. Boy, did this seem like we were doomed as a globe. This was a global issue. Every single country in the globe signed something called the Montreal Protocol, which was a treaty where everybody said, we are going to, over time, we are all going to reduce these pollutants. And at the time, people thought, we have no idea how we're going to do this. And not have aerosols anymore, how can we live? And not only did people figure out how to replace those chemicals, not all those replacements are great. That's something to always be thinking about. Nevertheless, we replaced those particulars. It made incredible economic opportunity for many companies, including American companies, who have made a lot of money over this, provided a lot of employment for people over time. And the hole in the ozone layer is well on the road to recovery. And NASA and agencies who study it say that it will basically be returned to a healthy status by the middle of this century. Again, people thought, we're doomed, we cannot do this. We did those 2 things, we can do this one too. And we don't have to know today exactly how we're going to get to every one of those things, but we will get there. We will get there because there are places like IU and Lawrence Livermore Lab and Purdue, and everybody else, and mayors, and tribal leaders, and governors, and elected officials, and farmers, and organizations that support farmers, and all of those school teachers, kids who know that this is important, who will work together, who will share their ideas, who will not be defeatist about this, will see and talk about the advantages that there are to doing these things here. So again, I'm so proud of you guys for the work that you're doing here. So glad that you're all here to share in this information, and wishing you just the most productive next day and a half. Thank you.
Yes, there is. She's going to graciously stay right there. We've got a mic, and we have some opportunities for questions. It'll be moving around. Ask you who you are and who you're with, and we'll take the questions now.
Raise your hand if you have a question. Oh, here's one. Hi, I'm Courtney Yarbrough. I'm with the Indy Public Safety Foundation, but I'm here as an O'Neill alumna and a concerned citizen. And Janet and I sing together in the Indianapolis Women's Chorus, which I'm not sure you want to know. But I want to know, how can communities and community groups come together to either support the work that's going on in these research institutions, or to pressure our legislators, or what's the best method that you've seen that me as an individual can really move the ball on this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that I have the magic answer, and there's an elected official in the room who might be able to she'll have her own ideas. There are lots of organizations in Indiana that work on these issues, and Earth Charter Indiana, Hoosier Environmental Council. Courtney, I think you are familiar with those. So getting engaged with those organizations is great. Talking to people, being educated yourself and talking to people, writing letters to the editor. In a big city like Indianapolis, that could seem like it's kind of hard to do, but lots of people live in smaller communities where the local radio station or people read those. People read the Plymouth Pilot in Plymouth, Indiana, I think, but normalizing this, right, and talking about all the aspects of it, not just focusing on, we have to do climate change. No, there's many reasons to do all of this work, and being bold yourself in terms of being greener yourself, and then talking about that. Solar panels on your house if you can do it, and those kinds of things. And singing, of course, also that's the way people learn stuff, is through singing it.
Hi, Isma Delara from Purdue University. I just had a question about the ag side, about the climate reduction plan. I hear about no-till, cover crop, but what role do the agrochemical industries play into that? Because they actively reduce the amount of microbes, which reduces the amount of carbon sequestration. So I was wondering, is there any chance for collaboration with the agrochemical industry and the EPA and USDA?
So sorry for all the Purdue jokes. It's really not fair because I'm not originally from here. I don't really feel that way about these schools, but so I bet that there are people going to be talking on the program, maybe, who could talk about that a little bit more. So I'm not the right person to really answer that question, but I could tell you that EPA, through our pesticide office, does work well and closely with the agricultural chemical industry, and tries to be moving in the right directions together. But I'll defer to later sessions.
Hello, Jim Poyser, Earth Charter Indiana. This may be repetitive, but we're seeing the slowing of the capacity of soil and trees to sequester carbon, putting even more pressure on our oceans. It would seem to me roads to removal is an urgent document. So I'm just wondering how you respond to that.
I think it is an urgent document, and there are also people looking at oceans, what's happening in the oceans, and whether the oceans have a part to play here too. Does roads removal deal with the ocean at all? No, Jennifer, I'm looking. Yeah. All hands on deck.
We have one more. Sorry, I'm running.
Thank you. Hi, Chad Fromm with Brightmark. We do development of a variety of environmental solutions. One of those is we work with dairy farms and help them manage their manure, methane emissions through like anaerobic digesters and converting that gas into renewable natural gas. We also work with like food waste, organic waste, and converting that. I know that's in the plan as well, or municipal solid waste. And I wanted to maybe get your thoughts on policies. You mentioned acid rain and that type of policy. Do you see policies similar to that where we sort of create a market, create a credit and create some markets for things like carbon reduction projects? There are states like California or Oregon, Washington have clean fuel standards. Do you see something like that on a national level or in other states being beneficial to sort of the carbon reduction efforts?
There's roles for policies that are enacted either as legislation or regulation, and also just programs that aren't mandatory, but where there are incentives to push people in the right direction. Food waste is an incredibly has so much potential for contributing to reducing carbon. Plus, we haven't even talked about food waste, but it has so many other benefits. And EPA has I believe it's a proposed food waste action plan out now, where they're taking public comment on it. If you're not familiar with it, you might want to look at it. That looks at the whole range of things, all the way from how do you support composting programs and that sort of thing, to more complex state or federal policies. And states move at their own speeds on these sorts of things, which is a great thing, actually, because you have states who are out ahead of the federal government, who then can, those practices can get a little bit of testing in the field, and then can turn into something that might happen at a regional level or at a national level. All right.